Okay. Well, good evening. Thank you very much for having me. It's really nice to be here with all of you. Dorothy, I really appreciated your comment about not very many women in the astronomy club when you first joined. And I'm going to touch on that a little bit at the very end of the presentation. But tonight, I would like to share the stories of some amazing women with you and try to at least contribute to giving them some of the credit where the credit is due. I hope you'll walk away from this presentation with a better sense of the contributions of women in astronomy, but I'm hoping also you'll be a little entertained and amused as we go along. Before we get started on that, I wanted to introduce myself a little bit, and listening to you all talk, it makes me feel like I'm back home. I've been a member of the Temecula Valley Astronomers for 10 or 11 years now. I used to live in North County up in Fallbrook, and so that was the club that was local to me at that time. But for family reasons, I moved to Northeast Florida and have lived in St. Augustine, Florida for about 6 years now. I call myself jokingly the Florida chapter, but in reality, there's only one member here, and that's me. But I'm still very involved with TVA, although remotely. Interestingly, I was thinking about it the other day. I've actually been a member of the TVA Florida chapter for longer than I was active there, I think. When I was originally asked to speak on this topic, it was the immediate past president of TVA. I thought, I don't know much about women astronomers, but I suppose I should know a lot about them. And I'm certainly not an expert, but somebody pointed out to me I am one. So that's the criteria for bringing this presentation to you tonight. Like Dorothy, I took an astronomy class in college. We didn't do any field work, but mine was an elective, so it filled a slot. But I didn't really start my involvement with observing or imaging until shortly before I became a member of TVA. Had no other astronomy experience or background at that point. But I had purchased a vintage travel trailer and enjoyed camping in Anza Borrego in the late fall to early spring. And during that first night under a clear, dark sky, I stepped out of my trailer, looked up, and my jaw dropped. The rest, they say, is history. I decided I needed accessory for my trailer, a telescope. So it was shortly thereafter that I joined the club. So I suppose I am a woman astronomer. Not that I'm making contributions necessarily to the body of knowledge, but I hope I'm playing one small part, if only to encourage people with whom I come in contact to look up as I share my images and my experiences with my telescope. So tonight I'm going to be introducing you to a number of remarkable women who in one way or another have influenced what we know and how we think about the night sky and our place in the universe. Some of their names might not be familiar to you, and while I don't expect anybody to remember vast details about their careers, I hope you'll leave tonight with an understanding and greater appreciation for these women pioneers. We're going to go a step back in time. In the 23rd century BCE, Akkadian astronomer priestess Enheduanna is recognized as the world's first author. She was a prolific author of poems, prayers, and other writings. But more importantly, she was perhaps the world's first known woman astronomer. Her father, Sargon, appointed her to the position of high priestess in the Sumerian moon god cult, and she was responsible for bringing together worshippers of the Sumerian gods with the Akkadian ones to create stability in the empire. As part of her duties, she was required to make detailed astronomical calculations and observations. Consider that this was no small feat, given that writing was only a few centuries old. Long gone, but not forgotten, recent recognition came in 2015 when a crater on Mercury was named after her. Although it wasn't terribly unusual for women to be what we call scientists in the ancient world, we didn't find many astronomers. Women were often overlooked or overshadowed by their male counterparts or family members. One such woman was Theano, typically remembered as Pythagoras' wife. She was a composer, poet, singer, and dancer, and it is said that she taught her husband that the spheres and stars of heaven moved in eternal song and dance. Isn't that poetic? She was also an accomplished astronomer and mathematician, and it is said that she led the Pythagorean school after her husband died. Now, if this is really the case, this would have set her husband apart from his contemporaries, who granted no political or educational rights to women. A 3rd century list of students in this school, however, listed 16 women belonging to that school. Like Theano, Algenaiki was a 1st or 2nd century AD Greek astronomer. She was intellectually gifted as well. It was thought that since she could predict the times of lunar eclipses, she was capable of making the moon disappear on demand. She was not shy about her abilities of observation and calculation, though, and was vilified for bragging. The women astronomers who associated themselves with Algenaiki during her life and after her death were called the witches of Thessaly, because, as Plutarch wrote, Algenaiki imposed upon these women and made them all believe that she was drawing down the moon. Probably the best known early woman astronomer is Hypatia, who was considered one of the first female mathematicians in history. She was the daughter of the Greek mathematician and astronomer Theon of Alexandria. Due to her brilliance, her father Theon raised Hypatia as Greeks would traditionally raise a son. He taught her at his school. And like Theona, she succeeded her father as the head of the school, which is something only men had previously done. She surpassed her father, though, in all fields, to the point of being recognized as the most important figure in astronomy and mathematics of her time. Her astronomical work included the revision, expansion, and correction, together with her father, of the Almagest, the great Ptolemaic astronomical treatise, which was produced in 13 volumes. In addition, Hypatia also carried out mathematical analysis of the movements of the stars described by Ptolemy in his tables. Unfortunately, Hypatia's written work was lost in the Library of Alexandria's destruction. Before she was brutally murdered by a Christian Brotherhood, which caused some cultural upheaval, she built medical and astronomical devices, as well as an apparatus for distilling water. These 3 particularly early astronomical women displayed diverse scientific contributions, though the paths by which they entered the male world of astronomy are distinct. Centuries, though, would pass before we find mention of additional women making their contributions in astronomy, all the way until the Renaissance era. Marie Kunitz was considered one of the most accomplished astronomers of her century. She was born of 2 educated parents, but as a woman, she was denied a formal education. So she received much of her education from her father. If a woman was to be a scientist, it was helpful to have a male relative take interest in her education. This wasn't necessarily unusual, but it wasn't common either. The granddaughter of the German mathematician Anton von Schultz, and with the guidance of her grandfather, as well as both her father and her husband, Maria mastered mathematics, astrology, and astronomy, as well as the more, quote, acceptable skills of music, art, and literature. Education was expansive and ongoing, even in the midst of religious discrimination. In 1629, she and her Protestant family fled to Liegnitz to escape Ferdinand II's Catholic persecution. In Liegnitz, she met and married her husband, then was forced to flee again in the midst of the 30 Years' War, where she and her husband settled in Poland. By this time, she was fluent in 7 languages: German, Latin, Polish, Italian, French, Hebrew, and Greek, which helped her in her later accomplishments in astronomy. Back in 1609, Johann Kepler published his Astronomia Nova, which laid the groundwork for what would become known as Keplerian astronomy. At the time of the writing, few astronomers embraced the theory that planets moved in elliptical orbits around the sun, with the sun as the foci, that the center of the sun and the center of a planet sweep out in equal area and equal intervals of time, and that the amount of time a planet takes to orbit is directly related to its distance from the sun. Well, Maria not only was one of the few that saw the truth in this theory, now even Galileo didn't agree, but she also saw flaws in Kepler's catalog of stars and planetary tables. So while she was exiled in Poland, she used this time to work on revising, correcting, simplifying, and translating Kepler's work on the prediction of the movement of the planets around the sun as set forth in his famous laws. She removed the logarithms and used her mathematical knowledge to simplify the algorithm and facilitate their understanding, as well as to propose a more elegant solution to the so-called Kepler problem, and was published under the title Urania Propitia. She finished her first and second tables in 1643 and then the third in 1645. The book was published in 1650 at her husband's expense and included a foreword specifying that although he's instructed his wife in calculating planetary movement, she mastered it and developed the tables on her own, demonstrating a command of high-level mathematics and astronomical calculation, as well as a deep understanding of Keplerian astronomy. This earned her a sterling reputation in academic circles across the continent, and she was even compared to Hypatia. Bearing in mind she spoke 7 languages, Urania Propitia was written in both German and Latin, which helped to, first, establish German as a language of the sciences, and second, make the tables accessible outside of the university. When it was written, few women were welcomed into the upper echelons of the sciences of philosophy and science and astronomy and mathematics. In fact, the general cultural atmosphere wasn't conducive to educated women at all. Recognition of her accomplishments is more modern, when in 1960, a minor planet was named Maria Canutia, and again in 1973, when the Maria Kunitz crater on Venus was named. Maria Kirch, she was educated from an early age by her father, who believed girls deserved to be educated like boys. Maria lost her father and her mother by age 13, so she was educated by her brother-in-law, as well as known astronomer Christopher Arnold. She became Arnold's unofficial apprentice and assistant, though, and through him later met her future husband, Gottfried Kirch, a famous German astronomer and mathematician. Although he was 40 years her senior, the relationship was mutually beneficial. He had a wife to take care of his 4 children and an assistant to run the calculations, gather data, and otherwise assist him. She was able to continue her education in astronomy, though, and without Gottfried, it was unlikely she would have been able to participate in astronomy independently. As a side note, all 4 of their children pursued the study of astronomy. But due to societal norms, women were not permitted to attend university in Germany. However, because the work of astronomy and observation of the heavens took place outside the university, women were not precluded from studying astronomy. Even so, most astronomers of this time did not have astronomy degrees. Rather, they had degrees in medicine, law, or theology. Well, thanks to her training as an astronomer over the years, Maria and Gottfried worked as a team, making observations and calculations in tables, calendars, and almanacs. And in 1702, she became the first woman to discover a comet. Although the discovery was initially attributed to her husband, the error was corrected a decade later. But we'll come back to this a little bit later. Despite the obstacles that stood in the way of her access to academia, Maria Kirch continued to publish her work, including her observations of the aurora borealis in 1707 and the conjunction of the sun with Saturn in 1709 and Venus in 1712. Emily de Châtelet was born in 1706 to an aristocratic family. Her father was the chief protocol officer at Louis XIV's Versailles, so she had the privilege of being tutored by some of the best scientists at court, including Alex Claret. Her father recognized her intelligence and brought tutors and leading scientists in who taught her 6 languages, mathematics, and physics. The burning question during this time period was, what causes planetary motion? Isaac Newton ascribed it to the universal gravitational force presented in his foundational work, Principia Mathematica, in 1687, which explained the motion of the stars and the planets. René Descartes thought instead that particles swirling in the heavens move the planets and cause the Earth's gravity. Well, Emily's most outstanding work is her translation into French of Newton's Principia Mathematica, originally written in Latin, a work in which Emily elaborated on and contributed her own commentary. Emily wrote several additional treatises on science. Seeing the superior predictive power of Newton's approach, Emily wrote Institution de Physique to present Newton's theory. She wrote it in French and updated it by replacing Newton's geometric methods with the powerful new tools of calculus. This work is considered the first didactic or popular book in the field of physics, which she wrote to instruct her son. And it also enabled her to contribute to the astrophysics of the time. She completed it in 1740, just before her death, and it was finally published in 1759 by her lover, the famous French writer Voltaire. And thanks to Emily's talent as a popularizer, the work helped to facilitate the understanding of Newtonian ideas and contributed to their dissemination in France and throughout the rest of Europe. In the spirit of the coming solar eclipse in April, I'd like to briefly mention Nicole. She belonged to a French noble family in the service of Louise Elizabeth d'Orléans, and she was well educated. She married the royal clockmaker, Jean-André Lepaute, with whom she collaborated on the calculations included in his treatise of clockmaking, and which introduced her to scientific circles. Her mathematical talent led her to work with astronomer Jérôme Lalande and the mathematician Clairaut to verify the predictions made by Edmund Halley on the return of the Hamanus comet after calculating the effect of the gravitational pull of the different planets and how it affected its trajectory. In 1762, she definitively won the recognition of astronomers of her time and of the general public with the publication of an article in Connaissance des Temps, or Knowledge of the Times, in which she predicted with great accuracy the solar eclipse that would take place 2 years later. The work included a map with the duration and exact time of the beginning and end of the eclipse in different locations in France and across Europe. And hundreds of copies were distributed among the population wishing to watch the event. So the origin of the documentation of the path of totality. Probably the most famous of early women astronomers, Caroline Herschel, of course, the sister of William Herschel, royal astronomer to King George III and discoverer of the planet Uranus. She served as William's, quote, assistant and worked hand in hand with William, initially polishing mirrors and performing other assistant tasks. She later assisted William in his observations of the firmament, where they compiled a 20-year survey of the night sky, including 2,500 new nebulae and star clusters that were eventually compiled into the new general catalog. As part of her assistant duties, she was given her own Newtonian telescope, being asked to sweep the skies for comets, from which she made observations in her own right, which led to the discovery of her first comet in 1786. So a side note, there is some debate about who the first woman was to discover the first comet. Some say it was Maria Kirch, who discovered it with her husband, and for which he was given credit until 10 years later. And some say Caroline, who is recognized as the first woman to discover a comet on her own. Comets were of great public interest, and Caroline's quest made her quite famous. After this first comet discovery, eminent scientists came to see, quote, Caroline's comet, and William was called to Windsor Castle to explain the comet to the royal family. In 1787, King George III gave her official employment as William's assistant, granting her a salary of £50 a year, which was the first professional salary paid to a woman in England. After her discovery, Caroline focused on the discovery and cataloging of comets, which at the time caused a sensation in society and made her popular with the general public. This was all the more so when her astronomical works became the first papers written and signed by a woman to be read, although not by her, at the Royal Society and published in its Philosophical Transactions. Wang Zhenyi descended from a family of intellectuals. She was educated by her grandfather and father in defiance of the ban on educating women in 18th century China. This mathematician, astronomer, and poet applied her knowledge of trigonometry to study and describe various celestial phenomena, such as the precession of the equinoxes, and especially solar and lunar eclipses. She studied eclipses and demonstrated them with an ingenious homemade setup in which a rotatable round table in a garden represented the Earth, a crystal lamp hung above it, as was the sun, and a circular mirror on the edge of the table acted as the moon. The objects were moved according to astronomical principles and demonstrated how eclipses worked, as well as the relationship between solar and lunar eclipses. Her observations of eclipses were incredibly accurate. Interestingly, she was also known to tutor men in mathematics, astronomy, and poetry. Now, Mary Somerville was a Scotswoman and daughter of a British admiral, but she was born of a very humble family. Unlike the others I've discussed, Mary received only limited education, but taught herself mathematics and astronomy as well as French. By 1827, thanks to her husband's support, her abilities were sufficiently recognized for her to be commissioned to produce a revised, popular version of Laplace's massive tome, Traité de mécanique céleste, which was an extended revision of Newton's Principia. Somerville's revision, published in 1831 under the title Mechanism of the Heavens, went deeper into gravitational theory and introduced new mathematical methods and mathematical developments. The work was very well received, and like Émilie de Châtelet's effort, contributed to the dissemination of Newton's and Laplace's ideas. She has the distinction of being the first person to be described in print as a scientist. The term was coined and introduced in a review of a revision of one of her books to replace the term, quote, men of science, in order to include Mary. While Émilie de Châtelet's fame faded in time, Mary Somerville was honored in 2017 with her portrait on a Scottish banknote. Additionally, a paper by Mary Somerville was the second appearance by a female author in the Royal Society's Philosophical Transactions after Caroline Herschel's entry. Now, bear in mind that 18th century women still had to rely on the men in their lives for access to scientific work and education. And this remained true for much of the 19th century. Each of these women had their own path into the scientific community. Each made her own success. Finally, this started to change. Colleges only began admitting women around 1865, with the exception of Mount Holyoke, who started in 1837. Now, Annie was influenced by her mother, who had an interest in astronomy and studied physics and astronomy at Wellesley College, as well as advanced studies in astronomy at Wellesley. When the Harvard Observatory started gaining fame for its photographic research, Cannon transferred to Radcliffe College, which was affiliated with Harvard, in order to work with Edward Charles Pickering, director of the Harvard College Observatory. In 1881, Pickering was overwhelmed with the volume of data that was being collected, and he also had doubts about his assistant's competence. So he fired the male assistant and replaced him with his maid, Wilhelmina Fleming. She was so adept at computing and cataloging data, more than 80 women were hired during Pickering's tenure to assist with this work. Now, lest we think that Pickering was a progressive thinker of his time by hiring women, the Harvard computers, as they were known, were also known by the moniker Pickering's harem, clearly an indication that the culture was still not ready for women in the sciences, with rare exceptions. In fact, in 1873, professor at Harvard, Edward Clark, wrote that, quote, a woman's body could only handle a limited number of developmental tasks at one time, that girls who spent too much energy developing their own minds during puberty would end up with underdeveloped or diseased reproductive systems, end quote. And this was only 8 years before Pickering started hiring women. Pickering also preferred women because they were believed to be more patient than men for this kind of work, and because, of course, they accepted lower wages. Pickering limited the women's work to clerical tasks, but the only way he could achieve his goal of photographing and cataloging the entire night sky was to hire them. They worked 6 days a week, earning 25 to 50 cents per hour, half of what a man would have been paid. Now, Annie began her career as one of a few dozen of the Harvard computers, as they were known, these female computers or mathematicians, where Annie and her colleagues spent their time examining photographic plates of stars. Some women reduced the photographs to make them as clear as possible. Some classified the stars by comparing them to known catalogs, and some cataloged the photos themselves, making notes of each, then copying them into tables. This work gave these ladies specialized knowledge of the sky considered too tedious for the men of the day. Further, most women were barred from producing real theoretical work and were relegated to analyzing. In the early years, Pickering and his maid Fleming had been developing a system for classifying stars based on their temperature. Cannon added to that work by greatly simplifying the system. In fact, Annie's greatest contribution was to create the current classification system for stellar objects, which classifies them as O, B, A, F, G, K, or M according to their temperature. In 1933, the International Astronomical Union adopted it as the official classification system for stars. However, it is now called the Harvard, not Cannon, system of spectral classification. Her work was finally recognized in 1938 when Harvard gave her an official position on its staff. Over the course of her career, Annie cataloged more than 350,000 stars, in addition to creating the Harvard Catalog of Variable Stars and supplementing other women's work in our understanding of stellar spectra. Most of the women I've discussed at this point enhanced existing astrophysical theory. Going forward, I'd like to introduce you to some women who've made discoveries in their own right. Henrietta Leavitt was educated at both Oberlin College and the Radcliffe College. She started her astronomy career at the Harvard College Observatory as one of the Harvard computers under Edward Pickering. Like Cannon, Leavitt's job was to analyze photographic plates. By examining thousands of these images, she found that some stars have a consistent luminosity during fluctuations. Henrietta studied Cepheid variable stars, named for the constellation Cephus, and is best remembered for discovering the relationship between period and luminosity in Cepheid variables, which are stars that fluctuate predictably in luminosity or inherent brightness. Cepheids are used as standard distance markers in astronomy, allowing scientists to estimate distances to galaxies and other faraway objects. This was a unique tool to measure vast cosmic distances. At least one contemporary astronomer thought Leavitt's research deserved a Nobel Prize, but she's received very little credit for her work during her lifetime, with most of the glory going to Harlow Shapley, the director of the Harvard Observatory, after Pickering, who used Leavitt's work to chart the distances in the Milky Way. After her death, however, other astronomers came to recognize her work. In 1923, Edwin Hubble found Cepheids in a dim patch of light, then called the Andromeda Spiral Nebula. He used them to calculate its distance as 900,000 light years, which put it far outside our own Milky Way. Hubble had found the Andromeda Galaxy, the first of many billions of separate galaxies in the universe, and a stunning discovery at the time. Beginning with Annie Cannon and Henrietta Leavitt and others hired as assistants, women could do significant astronomy, but they still worked on assigned projects. They were not independent researchers who could pursue their own ideas, nor, as I mentioned, were their accomplishments always recognized. To reach a higher professional level, women had to earn PhDs. This was not easy, even into the 20th century. Born in England in 1900, Cecilia had always wanted to do research. A scholarship to Cambridge University allowed her to study science, but only in a non-degree program. And her physics professor, Ernest Rutherford, regularly humiliated her as the only woman in his class. However, noted astronomer Arthur Eddington inspired her to choose astronomy. But the UK lacked graduate opportunities for women, so she left for a graduate program at the Harvard Observatory under Harlow Shapley. The fact that we know today that stars are composed mainly of hydrogen and a small proportion of helium is largely thanks to her research. In 1925, with her celebrated thesis entitled Stellar Atmospheres, in which she carried out a painstaking analysis of their spectra, she reached this revolutionary conclusion. With that thesis, she became the first person to earn a PhD in astronomy from Radcliffe College of Harvard University. But in 1925, her theory ran counter to the prevailing idea that stars had a composition similar to that of the Earth, so her work fell on deaf ears. In fact, so much pressure was put on Cecilia to insert the caveat that her results for hydrogen and helium were, quote, almost certainly not real. It was only 4 years later, after independent astronomical research confirmed the sun's composition, that her groundbreaking astronomical research and seminal contribution began to be highlighted. It is now taken for granted that hydrogen is the most prevalent element in the universe, and that hydrogen undergoing nuclear fusion powers stars. In 1962, an extensive review of 20th century astronomy called Cecilia's research undoubtedly the most brilliant PhD thesis ever written in astronomy. Cecilia was not well recognized in her lifetime, although she elected to stay under the radar and remain at Harvard after completing her doctorate, but was unable at first to get a professorship because she was a woman. Instead, she continued at less recognized positions while publishing numerous books about stars, variable stars, and galactic structure. She was finally awarded the first woman professorship at Harvard in 1956, later attaining a department chair, which was another first for a woman. Vera Rubin's interest in astronomy started in childhood when her father helped her build a cardboard telescope and her mother convinced a local librarian to let young Vera borrow adult science books. Like many girls, she was advised in school to stay away from science, but she kept going anyway, telling herself that she was just different from other people. Vera was the sole woman astronomy graduate from Vassar College in 1948, but was refused admission to Princeton because they did not accept female students. Rubin instead pivoted to Cornell and Georgetown universities for graduate studies. She did those graduate studies wherever her husband's job took them, raised her children, and received her PhD in 1954. Afterward, she held a variety of positions, primarily working from home to be with her small children. In 1965, she took on a permanent position at the prestigious Carnegie Institution in Washington, D.C., and during her work there, she applied to observe at Palomar Observatory, near and dear to all of us, I think. At the time, at the Hale telescope, there was a no woman allowed rule. She confronted that rule, ostensibly imposed because observing is an all-night process and the observatory had no ladies' room. Rubin cut a piece of paper into the shape of a woman with a skirt and pasted it on a bathroom door, creating the Hale's first ladies' room. She probably can also be considered the first astronomer woman's liver. In the early 1970s, Vera teamed up with astronomer Kent Ford and others, pioneering research in the little studied field of galaxy rotation. To their surprise, they found that the predicted angular motion didn't match what they were seeing. Galaxies were rotating so fast that predictions showed they should break apart if the only thing holding them together was the gravity from their visible stars. Rubin and her collaborators hypothesized that some invisible glue, an unseen mass, must be at work. Vera Rubin's principal contribution to astronomy was showing that galaxies are mostly made of dark matter, which is a substance that we cannot sense directly with current-day instruments. The idea of dark matter preceded Rubin, as Swiss astronomers Fritz Zwicky first proposed it in 1933, following an analysis of coma cluster galaxies. His work was dismissed at first, but this group provided the first direct evidence of the existence of invisible dark matter and showed that 80% of our universe is made up of dark matter and dark energy. She received the Royal Astronomical Society National Gold Medal of Science in 1993, the first woman since Caroline Herschel, but was passed over for a Nobel Prize. The Large Synoptic Survey Telescope, or LSST, was renamed for Vera Rubin in January of 2020. Now, I added this photo of Vera standing on the outside catwalk at Palomar Observatory back in December. So that scenery is probably very familiar to all of you. Now I'd like to quickly introduce you to several current working women astronomers. Jill, also as a young girl, rejected guidance to pursue careers more appropriate for a girl, announcing she wanted to be an engineer. Early in her childhood, she would look up at the sky and wonder who or what might be out there. She earned her Bachelor of Engineering Physics degree and was one of only 2 women in the graduating class, then went on to pursue a master's degree and PhD at UC Berkeley. As a research scientist, she has worked on a number of major scientific projects, primarily relating to the search for extraterrestrial life. After joining NASA in the 1970s in the program to search for extraterrestrial signals by systematically scanning the sky with ground-based radio telescopes, Tarter was one of the key figures in the launch of the SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence Institute, as well as its first director. Andrea Ghez, I understand she was in San Diego recently doing a talk, and I'm hoping some of you had the opportunity to take that in. I understand from a friend in the TVA who has met Andrea that she's very approachable. So if you haven't met her and have an opportunity to do so, definitely chat with her. I understand she's very, very personable and again, very approachable. Well, Andrea wanted to be an astronaut as a child, and she found a way to test the possibility of a black hole in the Milky Way when she became an astronomer, using huge telescopes to obtain high-resolution images of distant cosmic objects. Since the 1990s, she has tracked the paths of stars that orbit the center of our galaxy 26,000 light years away. When she analyzed the orbits using the same Newtonian mechanics championed by her forerunners, Émilie de Châtelet and Mary Somerville, she determined that their orbit is governed by a central massive body with a mass equivalent to that of 4 million of our own suns, concentrated in a small region of space. This provided clear evidence that a supermassive black hole was within our own galaxy. In 2020, the Swedish Academy of Sciences awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics to Andrea and her colleague Reinhard Genzel for their, quote, discovery of a supermassive compact object at the center of our galaxy. Ghez thus became the fourth woman to receive the award in physics and the first to do so for an astronomical discovery. One topic of current interest in the field of astronomy is the study of exoplanets outside our solar system. This research began in 1992 with the first observation of a planet orbiting another star. Today, over 5,000 exoplanets have been found, many of them thanks to the work of Sarah Sager, who is an astrophysicist and planetary scientist at MIT. She's been a leader in seeking new exoplanets and leads a team to locate them and analyze their atmospheric and core composition to determine whether they can or could have harbored life. She's received a MacArthur Fellowship, also known as a Genius Grant, and numerous other awards, and is also featured in the documentary The Hunt for Planet B, which was released in 2021. This is just a list of additional other stellar women in American history, primarily. Maria Mitchell, the first female astronomer in the US, the first American scientist to discover a comet, and the first female astronomy professor. Barbara Williams, the first African-American to receive a PhD in astronomy. Margaret Burbridge, the first woman to be appointed the director of the Royal Greenwich Observatory. Carolyn Porco, leading expert on planetary rings and moons on the outer planets. She was also the director and leader of the Cassini imaging team. Nancy Grace Roman, the mother of Hubble, NASA's first chief of astronomy and the first woman to hold an executive position there. Caitlin Casey, she's the co-leader of the Cosmos Web Galaxy Survey. And Jocelyn Bell Burnell discovered the first radio pulsars. She was the first female president of the Royal Society of Edinburgh, and she was also left off a Nobel Prize. There are so many more interesting women who've left our mark on the field of astronomy, but time precludes me from presenting more of them to you. I hope, though, this survey of women astronomers, you've obtained a few nuggets of information and maybe had a few chuckles along the way, so that when you look up at an object in the new general catalog, you'll think of Caroline Herschel, or perhaps when you determine the classification of a star, you'll think of Annie Cannon, or hearing about a new exoplanet discovery, you'll think of Sarah Sager. Women are making inroads in science and astronomy today. Women still, though, only account for about 27% of all astronomers. And I think this percentage is somewhat reflected in our amateur clubs as well. We're gaining ground, but we still don't have enough women in our clubs. So personally, I would like to thank you all for encouraging the girls and women in observing and learning about the heavens. I appreciated the openness of my club members to my participation when I first joined TVA, and I honestly haven't found that everywhere. So I challenge you to continue your outreach efforts with schools and communities, encouraging our female astronomers of the future and continuing supporting the women astronomers in your own club and your sphere of influence. And don't forget, Women Astronomers Day is August 1st. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Sharon. Virtual round of applause, everybody, for Sharon. That was amazing. I mean, wow, thought-provoking, chock full of information. I mean, it makes me want to research more about a lot of those women. Sharon, you should write a book.
Oh, yeah, no thanks.
Does anybody have any questions for Sharon that they want to open mic to her or in the chat? I'm going to check chat right now.
Do we have some? I'm going to stop my sharing here, and
Okay.
I don't know if we've got anything in the chat.
I don't see anything in chat. I think Dave answered one question. Nope, I don't see anything in chat. I,
Yeah,
I I have a question. Oh, actually, one just popped up. Maybe it's saying
yeah.
thanks.
And Dennis, thank you. There are a lot of other women out there. I could have you here till midnight if I tried long enough.
Yeah, I bet you could. So, what is your advice for getting women, especially younger, well, younger people in general? I find
Yeah,
hard,
younger people in general.
but
B, I think you're right. And to Dorothy's comment, to try to get more, just generally younger people in. Even TVA has had a little bit of a challenge with that. They've had some. I think we just have to keep doing outreach. It's been frustrating for me personally here. The club here doesn't do outreach like I was used to, and like you do in California. They had 5 people show up at an outreach event. We're excited. um, working with school programs, if there's an opportunity to go in and, do an astronomy club or some things like that might be an opportunity, just wherever we can go to encourage kids,
sure.
continue your outreach efforts.
Yeah, absolutely. Good
Yeah.
advice. Yeah. Anything else from members?
Miss Sharon, I have a question.
Yes, of course you do, Dennis.
You forgot to talk about Dr. Becky.
Yes, there are a whole lot of people I could be talking about, but you have to draw the line somewhere, right?
Understand.
Yeah.
I want to say thank you very much. This really was a lot of information about women that simply don't get the recognition that of all the work that they do. And I will speak to the fact that we don't have too many female astronomers even in our club. And I remember asking B what the percentage was out of nearly 700 and something. We have a very small percentage of women. And as a woman who's been in not the tech field so much like B or some other folks, I definitely, at times, I was the only woman in the male dominated, manufacturing group involved. My first job, and I've talked so much about it because it was still the best job I've ever had, was laser power optics. We manufactured the optical components and went into lasers. And as the first woman that they hired, I'm a little bit of a tomboy, so working with men wasn't such a big deal, but I really recognized just how unique that situation was. And they really treated me well as far as being a mentor. And that's something else I wanted to throw out. And even women being mentors for other women is cool, but men being mentors to women, unfortunately, is even more cool because it really does bring in the status quo. But women being mentors, I was just talking to my neighbor about that last night. She's a young person, she's in her 20s, and we just happened to talk about work and what her fiance is, the 2 companies we're both in. I told her just how important it is to glom onto a woman or anyone that you feel has the same kind of vision and focus that you do, that you can trust, that has personal integrity, and all the reasons that you want to have folks around you. So Sharon, it's really vital that we do have individuals bringing up the young folks, behind us, because many in our group are in their 60s and 70s, and I don't know who the other folks are that are older, but we all still bring so much information, and it's just even historical information about a club or even just our experiences and work. I think is really important to make sure that we do, when we do our outreach. Now that I have a more portable telescope, I always reach out for the little girls, little boys, women that are out in the clubs, because they might not even have an opportunity. And I know I'm yammering, but when Ken and I and Jose and some of the other folks have gone out to the SPY show, the SPIE show, and we're downtown. It's still amazing to me that some of these young, brilliant PhDs, they've never looked through a telescope. And here they are involved in optics, light, and that whole physics, to me, is just unbelievable. And to me, that's also being a teacher. Every individual that we go out, we're teaching something, we're sharing something about astronomy and our passion, whether it is in the physics end of it or just visual astronomy. I really think it's important that we do that we make sure that we embrace people and drag them along with us so that they can see all the different things that we have. And you just never know. When we go next month and at the Greater San Diego Engineering, I'm sorry, Ken, I'm going to screw up the title. Of all
Science and Engineering Fair.
There we go. You know, and we're out there grading, judging, and Vivek is, again, the young man that we've been just so proud of, his parents especially, for, you know, keeping that young man in the forefront and providing him with telescopes and all these resources to do his job. I really feel stupid. These kids are brilliant, and I've had to go back to my books, looking at all of my information to make sure I understand just half of what they're explaining on their board. It's just really incredible and amazing, just how far technology has embraced all these young little minds that are sponges. And I'm looking forward to what they're going to be able to accomplish in 5, 10, 15 years.
Yeah, Gracie, I just a quick follow-up on that. I think you make a really good point. In general, I don't think girls are encouraged, even today, enough in the maths and sciences, in our schools, let alone in astronomy in particular. But you make a really good point about the male role models and things. I come from a male-dominated career as well. Between the military and software engineering and those kinds of things, you know, I was the only woman most of the time. And I don't see that changing a lot yet. I think just generally we need to do a better job recruiting our girls into those fields. But it's interesting because as I think back about the outreach I was doing when I was still in North County, the girls were often very shy about going even and looking in telescopes. I really had to work on them to get them to even be courageous enough to step up and look in the eyepiece. And so I think that's really a good opportunity, I think, as you're doing your outreach. So.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah.
And I just saw, I'm sorry, I just saw Kurt's comment. And I read the same thing too, as far as something happens to young girls around, what was it, Kurt, 9 or 10 years old, that you wrote down, that something happens with science, whether or not they're put into a different direction, or something happens at home, or whatever that that influence is. You know, I agree with you. It needs to change in some kind of general way, or maybe even more specific. And, you know, we hope that when we do outreach, that we are reaching and showing these young people that, yeah, there's a path for science. Come on down and, you know, drink the water.
Yeah, it's still not cool to be nerdy and smart. I see that in my granddaughter. Yeah.
We thought the Big Bang Theory solved that problem.
Does anybody know of a girls' organization that they would join and that would have a science-related component that we could invite to participate? You know, we do special things at Palomar Observatory for all kinds of educational groups, and we get lots of Boy Scout troops. But of course, Boy Scouts have an astronomy merit badge. And the oddness is Girl Scouts don't have anything like that. And we'll probably get more. I've probably done more with girls now that they can join the traditional BSA and they're wearing Boy Scout uniforms, if you will. Just through just a couple of structural mechanisms like, hey, there's a merit badge, let's go work on that. I don't know of such a women's group or a girls group that, you know, we could kind of encourage, but it would be nice to have one. Sort of as a vehicle for outreach.
Great idea.
And that's a really good idea. And you just made me think that Biocom has a women's group, Women's Leadership in Science. that they
Ooh.
often, I don't know what it's called, but I know, there exists such a thing, specifically for young women. So we should chat about that. That's a great idea.
If it's, even if it's a professional women's group, they might have girls. I mean, any way we can get this thing rolling.
Yeah, it's a great idea. Great idea. Any other questions for Sharon or or things to talk about from anyone?
Can I ask a follow-on? Do we have any idea, women in science, what's the most popular science for women to get involved with? I suspect part of them would be the newer things like biological sciences and biochemistry and so forth that, don't have all the male, stuff going on. But is astronomy one of the more popular? I'm biased because Caltech is just women
Yeah.
astronomers everywhere.
I don't have any insight into the data. So I don't honestly know.
Yeah,
Honestly know.
just out of curious.
I do. Can anybody hear me?
Yeah, Patty,
Yeah,
go ahead,
speak up.
Patty.
Oh, okay. Well, it seems to be a really good effort made in aviation to get young girls into that, and that's happening. It's amazing what's happening there. So, because when I started out flying, my dad got me started in that, and he got me also interested in astronomy. Just like an interest in it, But it was only 3% of women who are pilots, and now it's 6%, which is pretty low, but there's some involved with some aviation organizations, or I've been watching them, and they're really doing their best to get more women involved in aviation, which is very science oriented. And I think the key is just, like outreach, just getting them out, going for an airplane ride. I think that's the best, that can be done, and making it interesting and exciting, and just mind expanding. That's the way my father introduced it to me. I've never taken a college class, but I always wanted to, and I still want to. I took geography instead, but that, looking back, it was like a toss up. But it's just getting their interest in studying it. But not going over their head, because you start, and this happens in aviation too, for anybody, you start talking over their head, talking, it kind of shies them away. So you kind of have to put things into layman's terms, and then they'll stay interested. The high school, it just doesn't, I don't remember anything in high school. Physics was really good support for when I got into aviation. I wish more of this stuff was taught in high school. I mean, it is, but not enough, But yeah, I think what you're doing with the outreach is the best thing. Just keep doing it, because that's what's being done in aviation organizations, trying to get more women in. And there's even a women in aviation organization, that is really supportive. If there was a women in astronomy organization, any women's groups, formal group, nonprofit organization, that might help.
Thanks, Patty. Nice points.
B,
Anybody?
yeah, B, I have a comment. Dave here. Her comments are really important, because having an institutional top-down approach to solving this problem of reaching those women that might be interested in astronomy is extremely important. And at the same time, the other side of it is we need to recognize those girls that have the astronomy bug during our outreach programs. When we run into so many people, so many students that just have the bug, that are just crazy about it, but they don't know where to go with it. And I think if we can make that connection between identifying those kids, and in this case, lots of the girls are fantastic. They know, they pick up how to move the scope, how to see things, how to communicate. And if we could connect them with the program so we can identify from the top down, I think that's what outreach is all about. It's how do we make that recognize that talent or that interest and give them a way forward so that they can move towards that professional career. I'm sure Dennis has a lot to say about that as well. He's got so many stories to tell about kids at the telescope and how they just get turned on, and myself as well. I mean, so many years of doing that. So anyway, my comment.
And I think how you tap into those kids, how do you get them into your meetings and be able to have follow-up with them? That's why I think where that breaks down sometimes.
Yeah, getting them into meetings is kind of hard sometimes. Most of our original contacts with kids are in school programs where we do our outreach programs, or in the public parks where those younger students, boys and girls, show up and they have an interest, and they just have this frantic effort to try to understand what's going on. They want to look in the telescope and see the sky, and they have questions, and they have excellent questions because they now all have iPhones and they know everything in the world, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm seeing is we can recognize these students, these young students, boys and girls, equally, I would say, at the elementary school level, probably up to the age of puberty, and after that we've lost them for 5 years. But if we can plant that seed and get them going in a path where they can do their own discovery, we can help them anyway. They'll go down that route. Now, many years ago, and I'm sure someone will back me up here, we had a young girl who became a member of the club. First name was Sky, I think.
Yeah.
And she went on into a full educational program in astronomy. And she was fantastic to work with. She's just a natural at visual astronomy. And she related to students better than most of our club members did. And she was about the same age they were. So that's the kind of people I think we need to foster and give them a way forward, a plan to connect them to the resources that would help, further their interest in their education.
Oh, one more thing can I say? A Girl Scouts does have an aviation badge. Maybe, if they had an astronomy badge, that would help too. I don't know how you go about recommending it to them, but
let me comment this. It's been a few years since I've been out of the Girl Scout program. I'm a former leader, but there, at least when I was a leader, there was an opportunity for the local councils to develop their own badge. So it might be worth following up with the San Diego Council for Girl Scouts to see if they would be willing to put something together. And maybe that's where you can partner with them to create something or a series of badges for different age levels. That might be the way to go about it.
Yeah, and the 99s would assist with the Girl Scout aviation badge and the Boy Scout badges. And maybe some of the astronomy groups could do the same thing for the Girl Scout badges. You can have like a 2-day course, just teaching them the basics and stuff like that. That's what we did with aviation. I can't remember exactly what else, but it was just enough to whet their appetite.
If I could interject, I was let's see, who was it else? Me and Sonny, Chris Schmidt were out at the Girl Scout camp at Whispering Oaks about a year ago, and the Girl Scout leader out there asked us if we could do their merit badge for astronomy, and I still have it on my computer, and it was huge. And I said, I can't do it. We're only gonna be out in your we're just doing astronomy, and it's gonna be pitch dark out there. So if you want to invite us over maybe a couple of days, we could rip this thing out for you after I looked at it. So it was extensive and involved. And I've got the, I got the Boy Scout, here's the Boy Scout one right here. It's huge. But the Girl Scout one, they didn't have a book. That it was just pictures online, and they had to find constellations and look through a telescope. But the leader never came back to me to help them get their little badge. They didn't call it a merit badge; they called it something else. But they do have an astronomy a badge. I don't know what to call it, but it was very. It would take a while to get through it. Maybe one day you could go right through it all. I was just thinking maybe 2 days at 4 hours each, and it didn't have to be at nighttime. That astronomy event we had with them, when it got dark, the good news is Venus was out there. It was shining away. We showed them that it goes through the phases of the moon, and then the dreaded coastal marine layer crept up the mountain and covered it all up. And about an hour after sunset, we started packing out. It was sad. I yield the rest of my time to the chairperson.
Thanks, Dennis. Always interesting what you have to say. All right. I think we're going to shut this down and go to the contest unless there's more questions. So here's how this is going to work. There's the quiz questions. Answer in chat. Answer 1 / answer 2, answer 3.
Oh,
Most
shoot.
people at TDS probably know these answers. And a disclaimer, I think some of this is outdated, but this is what is stated on the TDS section of the website. So good luck, everybody. First 3 right answers win stickers. And Sharon and Dorothy, you get stickers by default. So if you guys want club stickers, please go to the SDAA website, click on my name, and send me your email address so I can get the stickers to you. And a slide is coming up here, not yet, but it has all the stickers posted that you can choose from. So good luck, everybody. Has anybody won yet?
Nobody has posted anything yet. I'm looking.
Oh, no.
Where are the questions?
They're on the screen.
Not seeing it on my screen. Wait a second. Move that over there. Maybe I can see it now. Now I can see it.
Good. Good.
Okay.
Here you go.
Priscilla wins 1. Priscilla wins it.
The casino.
Priscilla's
I
got
don't know
2.
number 2, but I'll go with the
Yeah,
casino.
she's cheating. I'll bet she's looking on the website.
I bet Priscilla's going to be our first winner if she gets 3. Number 3.
Sorry, Sonny. Sorry, Priscilla.
Oh, my goodness.
Well, I think she's right, isn't she? Well, then you'll have to notch it up.
I'm
a bit.
going out there tonight. We
I
got
think
a
Gracie
winner.
Gracie
our
got 'em all.
first winner. Okay.
Gracie, all right.
2 more stickers up for grabs. Well, I guess you could just read Gracie's answer.
Yeah. Just what?
I'll have to think about how to answer next. Maybe by direct reply. That's all right.
I didn't even think of that. I says, how can I make this so invited from
Hey,
everybody?
Gracie, did you know that without looking?
Yeah, I had a,
Nice.
yeah,
Nice.
because I didn't have the chat on. And
Right.
I saw all the numbers go, oh, good, people are, they're breaking it down. Like, and it's
Awesome.
like, okay, the only one I knew automatically was a casino because that's where we go to have breakfast.
That is so funny. All right, first 2 to say Cruising Casino 4 in chat win, and we'll close this puppy up.
Look at that. How easy can this be, people? Start
Yes,
typing.
I think it's Priscilla and Gracie win this time around.
All right, let's do that. Dave, last slide, you probably have it up, huh? Is just a reminder. Well, actually, here's the next slide with the answers for everybody. Cruisin' is, of course, the tiny green building, but very important on Observatory Row. In case of fire, right now, instructions are to evacuate to Golden Acorn Casino. And then our Boreal Sky is currently 4 at TDS. Last slide is just a reminder for next meeting. Oops, sorry, those are the club stickers to choose from. So reference that and let me know which ones you want. And last slide, Dave, is our next meeting on March 20th will be in person at Mission Trails Regional Park. We're going to ask a lot of members to share their knowledge for getting ready for the eclipse prep on April 8th. Thank you, everybody, for attending. This was a really great meeting. I really appreciate it. Thanks to the following on the slide. We hope to see you all next month.
Thank you,
Bea.
Sharon, and a great job, B. Phenomenal.
Oh, Ken, thank you. Thanks for all your help. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, B. It was great.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks,
Everything was
Sharon.
good.